So I wanted to welcome our panel guests. I am super excited to have all of you. All of you are clients and friends, and I'm excited about all of the stories that you guys have to tell. So we have Greg Williams here. Greg, you're the proud owner of a 2-unit, right? In LaGrange that you stole, that you
That's
like literally stole. And we can let you tell your story.
Sure.
And Vincent and Athena are land barons all over Chicago. They've got a fun story too. And John Hernandez also just took over his first 8-unit after having owned a 2-flat in the past. So I'm going to let each of you introduce yourself, just like a quick 1 to 2 minute thing, super informal. Just tell us a little bit about what got you going. Greg, let's start us off as our house hacker.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, John. Sorry if it's a little loud in the background. Got my little one running around here. But my name is Greg Williams, everybody. I'm originally from the Chicagoland area. Went to high school out in Naperville. Went to a school down at Urbana-Champaign, U of I, for civil and environmental engineering. Started my career out in Texas as an environmental engineer. I lived there for 4 years, and while I was there, I rented all 4 years. I'll never forget, I started listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast like 2.5 years in, and I listened to about 3 episodes and turned it off. I said, nah, I'm not interested in real estate. This doesn't make sense. I'm going to keep renting. I regret that decision, but I was 23, 24 at the time, kept renting. I moved back home in 2018 to join my family's business and really started taking a liking to real estate. And I was like, I don't want to rent anymore, just kind of throwing money away. I connected with John on Bigger Pockets. I think that was in December of 2018. And John was really patient with me. He worked with me from December 2018 all the way to March 2020, when I finally got the property that I'm in now under contract. We looked at a lot of properties, did a lot of analysis, sent a lot of numbers to John. And I finally took the plunge at what I thought was going to be the worst time, because of course it was going to be '08 again and prices were going to tank. So I didn't really know. I was definitely nervous buying. John will even tell you, I almost backed out of the deal just because I was like, spent 1.5 years analyzing and doing all that. And then when it was my time, I was like, oh no, I can't do this right now. But thank God I moved forward with it. And I've been house hacking for the last year.
And yours was one of my favorite deals of that year, because it was literally right when COVID hit. We never would have had that deal. I think there were 19 offers. Our team brought like 5 or 6 offers and didn't get any of them on that 2-flat in LaGrange. And I remember we had the conversation. They're like, you're the next in line. And you're like, no, I don't think we can do this. And I was like, no, Greg, you really, really have to do this. This is a great deal. And then another 2-flat on the same street just sold, right? In the last like 9 months, 6 months, something like that. It sold for like $100,000 more.
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Yeah. And John, why don't you tell us a little bit about you jumping into your first commercial deal?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. John Hernandez. Jumping into my first 8-unit, pretty head first. As John mentioned, I have a 3-unit property in Little Village. That was my first entrance into the real estate world of rent and hold. So I bought that back in 2018 in November, my wife and I, and experienced all the stuff you can experience on your first property in regards to contractors and so many things happen there, but it's all good experience to build off. And I worked with a realtor for that one. She's family friend, very great person. But I think after we did the deal, I felt like I felt like you could get a little bit more input from your realtor. And then same thing as everyone probably on this call, you've listened to Bigger Pockets, and you hear about building your team and finding that agent that can help you and give you guidance. So I don't know exactly how I think I listened to, it might've been the Straight Up Chicago podcast where I heard John, and I think I might've heard you somewhere else, John, but I can't remember. And I figured, give away his contact info, and I'm like, well, I'll reach out to him. To me, it seemed kind of distance, because you hear him on a podcast, this guy's not going to come. He's not going to answer my call or whatnot. So thankfully he did, and we connected. And right away, the wealth of knowledge coming from John was awesome. So felt really good about it. We started looking for places. Originally wanted to look back in Little Village, just because I grew up there. I know the area. And I kind of wanted to, I personally, just from what I've heard, I've always kind of been, I don't know if you want to call it afraid, but a little bit more of the unknown going into the suburbs, and then the whole, higher tax issue that definitely scares, I think probably scares some people away. So to me, that was kind of, I remember telling John, like, no, I'm not really interested of going into like the Berwyn, Cicero area and things like that. So, but we kept looking in Little Village for things were pricey and a whole lot of work needed to be put into a lot of those buildings. So I remember he shot out a note with 2 properties, one in Stickney, Illinois, and the other one in Berwyn. Same family was selling them, and we went out and we toured the properties. There was quite a bit of people there during the tours, and I actually, so we went ahead and put an offer into the Stickney property, and then I found myself with an 8-unit property that once I closed, I'm like, okay, not exactly sure why or how we got in here, but thankfully we did. It's been a great experience so far, and actually I got to credit my wife too a little bit, because when we started looking ahead, she said, we should look at something at least 6 units to make it worth while all the headaches. So I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm like, you're probably, I was a little bit more of the doubter. I'm like, no, let's stick with another 3-unit and kind of build off of it. But I will give her credit, like, well, let's just take a look and see what happens. So from there on, yeah, it's a value add property. Previous owners owned it, family owned it. It's been in the family ever since, I think the grandpa of the gentleman that sold it built it. So it's been part of the family, and they were at the point where they don't want to put any more money into it whatsoever. So that's been, basically it's been a flipping apartments as they free up, and those things haven't been touched since 1972. So you can tell, you can imagine the things that need to be updated, but overall good bones. So that's kind of how my story came about, and kind of digging into my first commercial property.
I have a couple more follow-up questions for sure. And each of you I could talk to for an hour or two. So I better jump back to Vincent and Athena. I met you guys before you're married, and you guys were partners, and you already had a little empire. So tell us a little bit about your empire and how you all decided to partner, and then obviously eventually marry and join the empire together.
Yeah, so we started 5 years ago. We house hacked our first 3-flat in Lyons. It was a disaster. It smelled like cat pee. There was maggots in a fridge. Okay, so we house hacked that for 3 years. We fixed it up. We lived in a unit. My dad ended up being a tenant in one of our units, and we also fixed that up. So once the building was pretty much, to our standards, we got, pretty standard rent, maybe even above market rent. We ended up saving enough to move into the next one that we live in now, which is in Elmwood Park. And we're kind of doing the same thing. This wasn't as bad of a building moving in, but there's still, work to be done. And so.
Now, to follow up on that, though, Vincent is one of the few people that's ever done a really creative deal that I've gotten a chance to work with. So not only have you guys done 2 3-flats, but you also have done a 5-unit, and then you did that really cool 2-unit deal in Thornton where you got all your money back in like 10 minutes. Tell us about that one, Vincent.
So I was actually looking for properties, and I was looking at properties from a wholesaler's list. And I was going down the list, and I saw this property that said Thornton, Illinois. I'm like, where the hell is Thornton, Illinois? So I pulled it up on the map, and I'm like, oh, this is actually in Cook County. And so that property I ended up putting in an offer and did not get it because it was a wholesale deal. You couldn't even take a look at it. It was, under one of those assignment contracts. So that one I didn't get, but there was another property down the street in the same town, and I had already done a little bit of research on the town. But I had all the same questions everyone has. It's like, is this a bad neighborhood? Like, you go online and you read some stuff, and there's some like crazy guy that says, the village is corrupt and the police are going to steal from you and all kinds of like wild stuff. But anyway, I went down to the town. I took a look at it. I found a 2-unit there. It was listed for, it was in the 90s. I think it was like 95,000. I put in an offer, I put in a low offer that I was willing to pay. It was a non-conforming 2-unit. I got it under contract, and then John and I started, our due diligence process. And while I was, I decided to forego a traditional inspection and do my own inspection because I'm pretty familiar with what I'm looking at, or at least I felt I was. So I actually took a lot of pictures of the property while I was like, well, what's the rental demand for this market, right? How are people going to want to rent this? So I actually listed it on the market while I had it under contract before I had purchased it. I actually started marketing it. I actually found a tenant, and for me, I was like, well, how can I, reduce my risk on this property if I don't really understand the market or understand what I'm getting into? So I actually set it up as a lease with an option to buy, a lease option, and I closed on a Thursday or Friday. And then by the following week, actually, I'm sorry, I closed on a Monday, and the week before, I was like going to close the week before, and I scheduled my tenants to sign a lease option to buy contract. And I actually had to delay their contract signing a few days because I didn't own the property yet. Like, they were ready to give me a down payment and get the place. And I didn't even own the property. I had to delay it a few days. So I actually closed on a Monday, and then they did a lease option to buy on Wednesday. So I actually got, I think 30% of my down payment back. I did a 25% down, and I think I got basically 30% of that back in 2 days. And then
for 57.
So I ended up buying that property for 57. I got two units, non-conforming 2-unit for 50, 57, 58 or something like that. So it turned out pretty good.
Yeah, people on this call have cars that are more expensive than that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. So part of what was exciting me about putting this panel together is all three of you have different stories, different angles on investing, but all of you still have 9-to-5 jobs. You're on the way to probably being in a position where you may not need jobs in the future because of moves you're making now. But I wanted to get your take. Like, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had, getting into the game, as they say? And I'll just kind of go around the horn. Greg, what were some of the biggest challenges for you, getting into your first house hack?
Yeah, I know. So for me, initially, one of the biggest challenges in running numbers, kind of being uncertain. Well, starting off how to run numbers. I sent countless emails to you, John, about, hey, is this a good deal? Am I doing this right? What type of return should I be looking for? So, and I have an engineering background, but, when you're buying, an asset, the biggest purchase of my life per se, I was really uncertain about the numbers initially. And then also too, I'll admit, also doubting if I really wanted to be a landlord. You always hear about you have to replace a toilet at 3 a.m. and I have had to replace a toilet already. It wasn't at 3 a.m. though, and it wasn't the end of the world. Got to replace. My tenant was fine, and I moved on. So an uncertainty, a fear of kind of the unknown. With it being my first deal and only deal that I have right now, those were some of the challenges I dealt with.
Vincent and Athena, what were some of the challenges that you all had to overcome, especially early on? I know you're a few deals in now.
Yeah. So one person brought up in the chat is inherited tenants. And with the 2-unit, I inherited a tenant. And for me, I never wanted to put myself in the situation of taking away someone's home. So I offered that person to stay. I offered to let them stay. I didn't do a screening process. Normally you screen your tenants. If you're not, you have to start screening your tenants. But normally you put them through a screening process. You check their income, their credit.
John Hernandez, you want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges as far as getting started, I think personally, I don't want to say if I doubted myself, but you do second guess. You hear all the horror stories, right? It's like every time you tell someone about looking to owning a rental, the first thing they want to tell you is all their terrible stories, right? So that alone, kind of discourages you. My personality, I think I'm not a hard ass. I'm a try to be easygoing, and that's kind of how I go about life. And so you hear the stories about having to be a hard ass with your tenants, and just I think that was more of my mental block. Getting having enough, of course, financial, being in the right financial situation to be able to do that. Thankfully, my wife and I were able to do that with. My first one was bought with a HELOC. So we took a line of credit out on our primary home, and the Little Village property that I bought was with a line of credit. So that was definitely a challenge. Work related challenges. Actually, I know that you mentioned the 9-to-5s. Actually, because of the job that I have a lot of freedom to move around and do stuff. So I'm not stuck in an office. I don't have a boss looking over my shoulder. So if I get a text message or a call, or I run around and go see a property, or handle something, I have that flexibility. So thankfully that's been something nice that has definitely helped out. But a lot of the unknown, actually, and I hope I don't hijack your meeting, but even like when I did my, thinking back, I look back at that first unit, I'm like, oh my God, so many things, that red flags that pop up now. But doing the inspection, the inspector calling out, hey man, you got galvanized plumbing, you got to update this plumbing. I'm like, okay, sure, no problem, I'll do that. But not necessarily connecting the dots of like, what the cost was, the amount of work that needed to be done, updating electrical and so on, all the CapEx items. So I think that's, those were some of the challenges, but mainly I think a lot of the, just the unknown and being afraid of jumping into dealing with tenants. I think that's probably one of the major, really things that probably were more frightening to me.
So kind of a follow-up question. What do you feel like was your biggest success so far as an investor? Greg, I'll let you kind of take this one and run with it.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, this is my first property. And really, I would say my biggest success has just been taking the plunge and realizing that, okay, hey, I could be renting right now and coming out of pocket probably close to $2,000 a month, I'm house hacking and coming out of pocket a couple $100. I'm 1 year ago, I didn't own a property. So, I was doing the whole deal analysis paralysis type deal. So, I don't have a ton of experience, but I say just buying a deal, I already have 60, 70K worth of equity in this property. Thankful to the market that I bought in, the area that I live in. So really taking that plunge. And then also, I would say, John, a big success is getting the right tenant. I haven't talked to a ton of investors, but I'm sure it's not pretty too common. My tenant is actually a landlord himself. And so he owns properties. We've had a good relationship. They live above me. So it's been pretty good so far. But having a great tenant really makes things a lot easier. Like I said, it just gets started.
Greg, let me ask you a quick follow-up before I jump over to John to answer that same question about your big successes. You almost picked a bad tenant, right? I remember when you were picking tenants, kind of talking you down off the first person that showed up with $500 in their pocket.
Yep.
I guess talk through the mentality of that as a first-time, housing provider, landlord, whatever you want to call it. Why were you tempted to take that person? Because you're a really smart guy. You're educated. Yeah. You work in a family business.
Yeah.
What was your motivation to take the first person that came through the door? And obviously, I helped walk you down off that. Almost told you I was going to come to your house and not let you give them the keys. But what was it that made you want to do that? Because I think that's a huge mental block for people when they first lease.
Sure. Yeah. So the mistake that I made is I got too close to someone's story, and I didn't stick to my criteria. I set criteria for criminal history, credit score, income requirements, and I got too emotionally tied to being a new landlord to someone's story. Even the woman that John's referring to, I ended up going to her current apartment and kind of seeing how she lives currently, because I heard about that on a podcast. Someone from Bigger Pockets, they go interview their tenants in person. So I did do that. But the mistake I made, and it can happen as people, you get too close emotionally and realize that, hey, any and everyone can have a sob story per se, but this is a business that I'm trying to start and run and grow. And that was the mistake that I almost made. And thankfully, John talked me off the edge. I got out of that situation. I returned the security deposit and prevented this individual from moving in. And thankfully ended up with a great tenant that checked all the boxes. And it's been with me over a year, renewed already, and we have a great relationship. But yeah, I would definitely say, especially for those who are just starting or looking to buy their first property, stick to your criteria and do not get emotionally tied to your applicants.
Yeah, 100%. So we were
Absolutely.
talking about biggest successes, and Vinny and Athena, I think, why don't we jump back to the question you were going to answer before, like some of the lessons, because I think some of the successes and the lessons tie together. I think you were talking about inherited tenants, Vinny.
What I was saying was, I'm in the office every day, and I'm in a company that this is before COVID, where they valued your presence greatly. They wanted you in the office every day. And I have a tenant that's not paying, you have to evict. I'm not sure how many of you guys have done a Cook County eviction, but it's really skewed to not help the Cook County system is not set up to have you be successful at evicting people. It's set up to allow tenants to stay in as long as possible. First step in eviction process is, gaining jurisdiction of the tenant. And you have to actually physically give them papers in their hand. And if they don't answer the door, you're SOL. So then the next step in the process is to get them to show up to court. And if they don't show up to court, you're kind of SOL. So eventually you try to progress and get the judge to be on your side that, hey, the tenant won't take the letter, or the tenant won't show up to court. I need you to, do your thing. And eventually, if you can get an eviction order, even when you get the eviction order, then you have to take that eviction order from the judge and go to the sheriff and file it with the sheriff's office and ask the sheriff to remove the tenant. And the sheriff goes, okay, file your application for an eviction, and then you'll wait 4 to 6 weeks, because that's how long it takes to do the eviction. In addition, once it's time for them to do the eviction, you don't have a day when they're going to do it. They'll let you know like 48 hours before they're going to do it. And then when they let you know that you're going to do it, you have to actually show up there or have a representative on your behalf to be there to actually evict them. They can't just evict them because you have a court order. You actually have to be present. So it's really difficult as a landlord, if you're trying to have a job or a profession, to evict someone. You really need someone there pushing that along like every step of the process. And you have to have a really good attorney that's, present, or you have to have someone else, doing that for you. So that's a big challenge, is evicting people while you have a 9 to 5.
Yeah, totally. John, we're going to bounce over to you. We talked a little bit about challenges. What are some of the big wins for you in investing so far? I know you've done 2 deals now. You've got the commercial 8-unit deal, and you've got the 3-unit.
It's funny. Looking back, I feel like probably one of my victories is sticking through it on that first property, because it definitely winds on you when you come across. I had the typical contractor screw me over. This property set renovations took way longer than it should have. I'm covering the mortgage and doing everything. So I think sticking through it definitely was one of the victories. Not because I'm on your call, but finding. I'll leave it as finding the right agent, and in this case, it was you. That and the right team, because I'll give a shout out to Sharon as well. I remember we went and saw the first couple of properties together, and walking out of some of those properties that needed a lot of work, she shot out an email and saying, hey, based on the comps and based on the work, I don't think it's the right. I think these things are way overpriced. So, that's something that I had not necessarily dealt with before, which was great. So finding the team, I think you always hear that. And I think personally, just kind of digging into that 8th unit, just not really knowing how to manage it or how you're going to do it, but just kind of powering through. And I know maybe a lot of this stuff sounds cliche, but really, I think just kind of acting on taking that step and just learning as you go. So I think those have been probably my successes, is really sticking through it and not letting a lot of the stuff that pops up, kind of wear you down.
So we've heard
Absolutely.
Heard a lot of really cool things from all of you tonight, and I want to give each of you kind of a chance to wrap up. I have kind of one final question before we do Q&A. What would you tell somebody who's looking to do the type of deal that you have done for the first time? And so I know Vincent and Athena, you guys have a commercial deal. So I'll let you talk to kind of the 2, 3, 4 unit market since you've done that several times. Greg, the house hackers, John, you can just talk about your first commercial deal. So Greg, what would you tell somebody that's looking to do their first, kind of the insight you would have?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say as a house hack, and if you listen to Bigger Pockets, you hear all the time, you don't have to focus on trying to hit a home run or getting $500 a month in cash flow, because it's probably not going to happen as a house hack. Approach the situation from hey, look at your alternative. If you weren't house hacking, you'd probably be renting 9 times out of 10, or someone may be in a situation where they're living with a parent, which is nothing wrong with that. Save up money if you are. But I would say, look at the situation as, hey, you're taking a step in the right direction. Hey, if you're going from $2,000 a month coming out of your pocket from housing by renting to only $500 a month, if you're buying in the right area, if you're buying the right deal, the right price, you know that, hey, when you move out, that the property should cash flow for you and be a good investment for you. So when you're house hacking, what I do now, because I'm looking for another house hack in the right neighborhoods, is I run my numbers 2 ways. I run it as I'm living in the property, just so I can understand what my out of pocket monthly expenses will be, after everything's paid, see what I have to make up the difference. And then I analyze it as when I'm not living in the property and this is standalone on its own, I'm running out both units, or if I get a fourplex, all 4 units, to make sure hey, that the deal cash flows. So approach it that way. As a house hack, it's not going to be a home run. You're not going to knock it out of the park when you first move in. But you should definitely improve your living situation, save more money, find the right area when you move out. You'll be really proud that you did. I haven't moved out yet. I'm just putting some money into my place, but I am really glad I made the decision to house hack and stop renting.
Good advice from Babe Ruth, who just hit a home run. It's not going to be a home run, although he just hit a home run. Very modest. Vincent and Athena, I guess, what have you all learned? Because you've done several now, I think 3, right? 2 to 4 unit type buildings. What would you tell somebody that's looking to buy their first true investment property, not a house hack anymore? You've got to show up with, 25% down.
And they're looking in the 2 to 4 market space still?
Yeah, because you guys have done that.
Well, I mean, to me, when I look at some of these 6 units, one of the things that I've talked to you about, John, before is I look at these 6 units and I tell myself, I don't want to live there. And why don't I want to live there? Well, there's no front yard. There's no backyard. There's no garage. You're 6 feet away from another 6 unit and in line of all 6 units on a busy street, right? So, and these 6 units, and they're going for $600K for a 6 unit or $650K for a 6 unit. So you're still at $110,000 per unit. You can get that kind of pricing on a 3 unit. And on a 3 unit, you got a front yard, you got a backyard, you got a garage, you got twice as much, 2-3 times more space in between you and the next building over. Sometimes you're surrounded by single family houses in a nice neighborhood. So to me, and also you can have all these people that might house hack as buyers to buy that property. So you have investors that could buy the property, or you have house hackers that can buy the property. So I think 3 flats and 4 flats and even duplexes, but mostly 3s and 4s. I think I'm very bullish on 3s and 4s because I don't see builders building affordable housing for people. So to me, affordable housing today is a 3 and 4 unit house hack, and which is really what that building was originally designed for a long time ago, which was before it's called house hacking. Is I don't know what the name, what they called it 100 years ago, but it was multi-generational family living, right? You moved in, your mom lived in 1 unit, your kids lived in another unit, and the whole, house was all family. So I'm very bullish on 3 and 4 unit properties because of that, because you're always going to have people that want to have an affordable lifestyle. And like Greg put it, excellent. I mean, I do the same thing. I run the numbers as a house hack, and I run the numbers as an investment. And hey, I can either cash flow a little bit and as an investment, or I can own this asset and live in it for free or for $200 a month. I mean, it's a deal. There's a no-brainer, right? If you can live in a property, own it, and it's $200, $300, $400 a month, and you're renting for $1,000 or $1,200, it's a no-brainer. You should house hack because you own it. It's a great opportunity.
And before we leave Vincent and Athena, give us your perspective. So a lot of the women investors, and I've heard investing is very male. We always use words like
Yeah.
deploy. We're marshaling our capital like we're going off to war. What would you say to anybody that's looking to get their first 2 to 4 unit that's more of the feminine variety?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can't be afraid to mess up. You can't be afraid of work. I mean, it's not easy. It's not like, oh, I'm going to make all this money and I'm going to cash flow and it's going to be great. Like it's not like that, So if you're not handy, you have to make sure that the building that you're buying cash flows enough to support to buy contractors and do work and all that. And I think, it just takes time to come up with systems and, ways to handle things. All the time we're, getting new things thrown at us. And we just deal with it as it comes. You can't like overthink. I hate to say, but women overthink a lot. And I do feel like that's, kind of something that you can't do in this industry. I think you just need to take it as it comes and, just deal with it.
That's obviously worked well for you and Vincent. You guys have built a nice portfolio. John, you're last but not least. Go for it. What would you recommend to somebody looking at their first 6+ or 5+, I guess?
Well, I think probably very basic, right? Look at the numbers. I think we all kind of covered off on that, making sure that it makes sense and you're comfortable with it. I think one of the things that a lot of people get caught up on is the, we've mentioned bigger pockets or everything that you read. You have those numbers in mind that you want to achieve. But I think I've read somewhere, there was this guy on Instagram that I had followed real estate, but he said, a lot of times I look at, what am I making off this building? Do I feel like am I comfortable with what I'm making or profiting from this building for the effort that I'm putting into it? So let's say it doesn't fit into this box that, Brendan Turner suggests, or Bigger Pockets has you need to get a cash on cash of X amount. I think it's great to look at that. And I think you shared with me a deal analyzer, which I'm sure you've shared with probably majority of the people. And that is a great thing to look at, and it did definitely help me for going into the 8 unit is digging into the utilities, making sure all that stuff was kind of having the track record, and the sellers were really easy to work with on that end. So I would say from that end, to me, making sure that the numbers make sense for you personally, taking away your quote unquote 6% cash on cash or whatever number that you hear someone quote. So that would be one. I think the neighborhood is definitely, if you feel comfortable with it, if you feel comfortable managing it, if you feel comfortable with the tenant base that comes across there, definitely, I would say that's something that I took a lot of a closer look on the 8 unit after purchasing the 3 unit. Like I said, I bought in Little Village. I understand and grew up around the area, but it's block by block there, and I didn't really fully understand how the block was where I purchased my first one. So looking at, it's 2 different worlds, Stickney versus Little Village, but either way, I drove around the building at night. I drove through it at different times of day. I feel like I really did dig into that property a little bit more, rightfully so. So, I think those are some of the things that pop up to mind for me. And then making sure you understand any CapEx that, needs to be taken care of. So to me, it's, a lot of dealing with your numbers and for them to, to make sense. And if you're comfortable with what you're kind of getting out of that.
Awesome. So we've reached the end of the main presentation point. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. And so feel free, all of the audience, to ask any of our panel guests tonight questions about their journey or anything that kind of piqued your interest. We'll just have a bit of open discussion now.